Welcome back to another Jake and Friends podcast. Today we have Mr. Trace Hamiter joining us today. Trace graduated from Auburn and is married to his wife, Cassie, and you guys been married since 2004. Is that right?
Like 20 years in May.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome.
Nice.
That's awesome. And you guys have 5 kids, and you've been working in college ministry since 2006, where he became the college pastor at First Baptist Opelika, where actually he was my college pastor and Kayla's college pastor while we were at Auburn. And you have, Trace has a master's in divinity from Southern Baptist Theological Seminary and a doctorate of ministry, which for some reason I completely forgot that you got that, which is awesome that you have your doctorate from Beeson Divinity School, correct? So that's really cool. So thanks for joining us, Trace. How's it going?
It's going good. Glad to be here. Thankful for you guys and what y'all do with this. This is really cool thing. And so I'm excited to get to talk to y'all.
Yeah. I actually want to give credit to Tori Harris first, because technically Parker isn't the one who even brought your name up first, because I interviewed Tori Harris and her husband Tanner probably almost a year ago at this point maybe, but I always ask people after we're done, I'm like, hey, who do you have to recommend, or is there anybody you would recommend to be on the podcast? And she recommended you. And so I just never followed up with you. So I am going to take credit for this, for having you on this. So appreciate it.
That's awesome.
So Trace, I know in a couple of years ago, you started All Things Ministry. And now you guys have changed the name to the Oaks Collaborative. Can you tell us a little bit about what that is about and what you guys do?
Yeah, man. I'll say it this way too. I don't want to make myself look any better than I really should, because what we do now is not what I thought we would be doing back when I started the ministry. You know, it's definitely, and this is kind of why the name changed, but we've definitely been a walking example of a couple different places in Proverbs. It says, the mind of man plans his ways, but the Lord directs his steps. And that's definitely been a key thing for us, is that we walked in a direction that I thought was what the Lord was pointing us to. And he has redirected our steps into what he really wants for his kingdom growth. And it's been a cool thing to see him guide, because his ways are much better than our ways. Right. So started, it all starts back. We started the Oaks Retreat at Auburn. That's one of the biggest things that we do and that people know us by. Started that back in 2012 when I was a college pastor. It kind of, essentially I guess we call it now as a little side hustle, and started it. The Lord immediately started blessing it. In 2014, realized, hey, this needs to be a 501c3 nonprofit for it to not be under any one church, like the church I led, but also for it to grow and to be able to flourish. And so we started All Things Ministries then, because kind of the vision at the time was, we're going to do all these different local ministries that are going to come underneath this umbrella of All Things Ministries, with the same heart that Paul had from 1 Corinthians 9 of, I become all things to all people, so that by all means I might save some. I do all things for the sake of the gospel. And then it was in 2019 that the Oaks Retreat had grown to a point that it really needed to be more directly cared for. And so I felt led to hand off the college ministry that I was leading to do this full time and to see what all the Lord wanted to do with it. And so started that in 2019, did start up some local ministries, along the way that the Lord's used in some cool ways, but his hand was really on those freshman retreats. And so, started up in 2019, started one at Troy. Jake, your alma mater. And and then in 2020 at Bama. And then ever since then, it's just been 2 a year until this year. We're starting up 4 this year. So,
wow.
And then changed the name to Oats Collaborative because, for a couple reasons. For one, the comical reason is that it was really hard to explain to people what we were doing, because All Things Ministries sounds like like it sounds. It sounds like everything. And so we have people be like, so do you just like do whatever you want to do then? Is like, is that what your ministry is? Like, no, that's not it. And it was, the frustrating part was I guess I expected more Christians to be familiar with Paul's approach to missions in 1 Corinthians 9. They weren't. And so whenever I said, like Paul, I want to become all things to all people so that by all means might save some, their response was more in the old American saying of, well, you can't be all things to all people. So you're on a fool's errand. Why would I, why would I give to you? Like, all right, man. All right. And so, no, but at the end of the day, the Lord gave me a vision before we started the Oaks Retreat. When I say a vision, I mean literally a dream in the night. I'd been praying for one, like Paul had of the Macedonian man saying, hey, come and help us. He had that dream. Mm-hmm. I've been praying for a dream like that, and of what he would have me walk in ministry wise. And man, I got a dream of a large live oak tree that had grown up all over Auburn's campus and all over. I was in downtown Auburn, and it was all over Auburn's campus, all over downtown Auburn, and it was stretching beyond what where I couldn't even see where it ended. Parker, you know what real healthy live oak trees look like down there in Fairhope, mm-hmm. right? Things are huge, and they create this massive canopy, and that's what I was underneath, and it was just covering everything, and it was dropping its fruit all over, and that vision God gave me, he made it clear, like, yeah, this is what I have for you. At the time, I thought it just meant the Oaks Retreat, and that's why we named the Oaks Retreat the Oaks Retreat at Auburn. But now, and hindsight 2020, now I realize he was saying, no, this is the name of the ministry that you're going to lead, because this is not just going to be for Auburn. This is going to be for campuses all around the Southeast, and honestly, what it's looking like now is all around the nation, and so the canopy is going to keep stretching all beyond. And so the heart verse behind our name is Isaiah 61:3. It says that they may be called oaks of righteousness, a planting of the Lord, that his name would be praised. And so the oaks, and then collaborative, because everything that we do is a collaboration of the body of Christ in a city. And so we don't do anything. We don't come in and, hey, we're putting this thing on. We won't do it if it's not a collaboration of the body of Christ, meaning, multiple churches, multiple, parachurch ministries, all collaborating together to make it happen. And so, because that's what we believe, we're aiming for unity in the body wherever, and unity comes through co-laboring alongside each other, not just by talking about unity, but by actually, like, let's get in the trenches together type of co-laboring. So yeah, that's the quickest version I could give up for you there.
Yeah. So that's awesome.
So did this start when you were at First Baptist Opelika?
Yeah. So it started.
You were there in 2012.
Yeah, I was at Opelika from 06 to 2019, and so this started right there in the middle.
Okay.
Yeah, I remember that because we were in school at that time, and in your college ministry, and I remember it starting up. I was like, man, what a great idea! I wish I would have had that when I was a freshman. Because man, like when I came to Auburn, I wasn't a freshman when I came to Auburn, but I knew nobody. I didn't know anybody, any churches. Like I didn't get any contact with anybody. I had to go kind of find my way. Luckily, I had people that helped me with that. But if I didn't, I mean, I would have just been lost in the the culture, the worldly culture.
And that's exactly why we do this, man. And Parker, we are open up to, these retreats are, we say incoming college students. So they're for, freshmen are the main audience for sure, but they're open to transfer students as well, because as you experience, I mean, it can be harder to start at a new school as a transfer student than as a freshman, because, a lot of things roll out the red carpet for freshmen, but they kind of just, hey, transfer students, y'all figure it out whenever you get here kind of. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we're for all incoming students, all of our retreats across the different schools.
Well, I will say, like me being a teacher at Fairhope High School, like I have, I'm the FCA sponsor at the school, and so that's why I'm repping FCA. But I have a bunch of leaders that are going to Auburn, and immediately when I hear that, I'm like, you gotta go to the Oaks Retreat. You have to. And before I even say anything, they're like, oh, we're going. We're already signed up for it. I'm like, this is awesome. Like, this is so cool. But they're like, these kids are like starting to find out way more about the Oaks Retreat, not just at Auburn, but like Alabama and all this other stuff. Like, it's really cool to see how God's been using it to connect people.
It's awesome.
Will you kind of walk through kind of how it started and what your vision was for it? Because I wasn't graced enough to walk the campuses of Auburn University from 2009 to 2013, but some of us here were. So could you just walk through kind of what it was like in the early days and what your original vision was? Because I know you were talking about how you just thought it was going to be like an Oaks retreat. Will you just sort of just highlight that and how it sort of changed over the years?
Yeah, man. So first off, to give credit where credit's due, it wasn't my idea. I first heard about the concept of retreat for incoming freshmen from one that was happening at Texas A&M. I worked at a camp with a lot of people. They went to Texas A&M, and I heard about it. And just like Parker just said, I heard about this thing, and I was like, man, that sounds like exactly what I needed as an incoming freshman. So, a retreat before classes even start to help incoming freshmen and transfer students be rooted in Christ, like start off college rooted in Christ, like realizing that there are people at your school that are living for Christ. Like you can do it, because I'm sure like y'all, I came off to college, like wondering if I was a brand new Christian coming off when I went to Auburn, and I was coming in wondering if I was going to be like, watching movies by myself every Friday night. I didn't know if I was going to have any Christian community, because that's not what you hear about for college, right? All you hear about is the party scene. And so, I came in, and now granted, I did get, there's obviously a strong, Christian, community here in Auburn. And so I got surrounded with those people, but I was still I was undiscipled and immature in my faith, brand new believer, very zealous, but immature. And I spent my entire freshman year bouncing around to different churches, never getting involved, never getting discipled, and just squandering a lot of time in immaturity. And when I heard about that retreat of helping freshmen be rooted in Christ and connected to local churches and ministries, and living for Christ in college, I was like, man, that is exactly what I needed. And so at the time, I knew it needed to start, but I was still a student at the time, and I knew it wasn't right. So whenever I left Auburn for a couple years, did some college ministry down in Tampa, and then the Lord brought me right back to Auburn in 2006. I was 23 years old when it brought me back, and immediately just started praying about when should I start this. And it was in 2012 that the Lord opened up all the doors. And so, yeah, from the outset, the vision's really still the same. We've just kind of refined to figure out how to do it really well. But the vision is always help freshmen be rooted in Christ, strengthened through Christ-centered community, and then bearing fruit on their campus. So the goal is to help them see that either if they don't already know Christ, to help them, be rooted in Christ through salvation. But if they already know Christ, help them see that Christ is worth living for in college, right? Like there's a lot of people who are already Christians who are trying to figure out, like, is he worth my college experience, or should I go try what the world has to offer, kind of decision making. So it's like, man, he's worth your eternity and he's worth your college experience. And then second is, because then we live that out. We live for Christ in the context of Christ-centered community. So let's get you quickly involved in local churches. And so we try to expedite that process by introducing them to local churches. They're hearing from pastors in our main sessions. They're getting to meet them in the ministry fair or at our breakout sessions or at our panels. They're getting all this. So when I was a college pastor before we started the Oaks, and freshmen didn't get involved in church early on in the fall. It wasn't until like January that they really plugged in, or maybe after our spring break mission trip, they would like really plug in. Now that the Oaks has come around, like it's become much more normative for a freshman to get involved, like by the end of September, like get really plugged into a church. And that's what we're going for, because the quicker they do that, the quicker the whole body of Christ as a whole in Auburn grows and is strengthened. And then the final goal is we want them to catch a vision for coming to college as a missionary, right? Like we're so prone to just make college, even if you are going to, stay true to your faith in college, it's still like college is a very me-centered time, right? What's your major? Who do you want to date? Who do you want to marry? What are you going to do after college? What are you going to do with your summers? And we wanted to embed this mindset early of like, man, let's make it about the name above all other names, as opposed to just about your own name, right? Like, and so, man, if you wanted to go Greek, that's great. Go Greek, but let's do it for the glory of God. You want to get involved in SGA and you want to be SGA president? more power to you. Let's just do it not for your name, but for the exaltation of the name of Christ, right? And so all these kind of things. You want to kill it in intramurals like Parker Sanders did and wear the intramural championship?
Got him.
Do it. Let's be a light for Christ on the intramural field. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's what we're trying to communicate. So it's that bearing fruit on your campus as well. And so that's all, those kind of core things have been there from the beginning. We've just kind of refined it. And then, like I said, starting in 2019, started expanding it to other campuses to where now, this summer we'll have 13 different retreats all around the Southeast.
Man, praise God for that. That's awesome. Yeah. So what, some of our listeners don't know that I probably should have said this from the get-go when I introduced you, but Trace married my wife and I, and my wife worked under him for a year. I think that's right. Yeah, we spent a lot of time together. Well, she definitely did with, at work and all that. But I guess, like, how was it when you were the college minister, the college pastor at First Baptist Opelika? How was it tough for you? Like, when you knew that you needed to do this, like you had this vision that God gave you, but you still were very, like, putting all your heart and soul into teaching, your students that came to your church. How was that for you?
Yeah, man, it, for the longest time doing this on the side, it was just, man, there was so much overlap, with it. At the time, Parker, our college ministry was, I would say, was unhealthily popular. We were kind of the hot thing in town. Mm-hmm. And so starting it up, those first handful of years, a big part of my heart was I wanted to spread the love. We had so many people that were just coming in and out of our ministry just because it was where everybody was coming. And I had brothers in ministry around Auburn that were amazing men of God, and their ministries, not that they were like struggling, but just they could have done so much more. And so I wanted to introduce these incoming freshmen to them, because otherwise it was almost like this funnel to our ministry, because again, we were kind of the hot ticket. And so that was the heartbeat early on. And I love that. I feel like it brought so much health to, again, just the body of Christ. I've always wanted to think very kingdom minded, right? Like, let's never get locked in our little kingdoms, our little K kingdoms. Let's focus on capital K, like kingdom of God across, a town and across a state, keep going. But, and so that was always my heart there. And I thought that brought a lot of health to it. And then it kept growing and kept growing. And that just continued to further. And then I think when it came down to like time of like, okay, this thing is growing beyond what I can do as a side hustle now, that decision was difficult. But, somebody, I think it was Dawson Trotman, he was the guy who founded the Navigators, which is an amazing, parachurch campus ministry. Mm-hmm. And I believe I read it in his autobiography where it said, or not autobiography, his biography, that said, what are you doing that someone else can do? And what is no one doing that you can do for the glory of God? Go do that thing. And that's kind of what it came down to for me. As I looked at it and I thought, man, there are hundreds of guys that would love to be able to lead this college ministry, and they could do it just as good, if not better than me. And yet there's nobody that's doing this that I see that needs to be done. It's not that nobody else can do it. It's just that nobody else is doing it. Yeah. And so I said, that's what I need to do. And I need to fill that gap because I want to fill that gap. And because, this, like I said, I mean, so many different people could swoop in and take over for me. And that's what happened, I mean, in the college ministry, I think that the guy that took over for me at FBCO, I think he took it and I've told him this multiple times. He made improvements that I couldn't figure out how to make, but he came in with fresh vision, and that I told him when he came in, I think these things need to happen, and he was able to do them, and I never was. So that's the kind of thing we're going for, man. When everybody walks in step with where the Lord is leading them to, and like fills the seat that God intended for them to, and his kingdom purposes, then it's going to cause, growth all across the body. And that's what we always it's not about how much can I do or all this kind of thing. It's about faithfulness, man. Can I just be faithful to do whatever God made clear for me to do? And it might not look super sexy at first. Like me stepping into this thing was really confusing for a lot of people when I first did it. And I think some people were kind of frustrated with me, like, why would you do it?
Why are you leaving? Yeah.
Yeah. And like I said, I didn't have this great vision for what I'm doing now. I couldn't say to them, well, guys, we're going to start these things up on campuses all over, the Southeast and maybe even the nation. And I didn't have that vision. All I knew was it was what God was telling me to do, and it was the right thing to do. So yes, it was hard, but no, at the same time, it wasn't, because it just made it so clear that it was obedience.
So how was that for like your wife, Cassie, and your 5 children? Like, I know probably the youngest children, I don't know at that time, like, how old they were at that time, but how was that transition? Cause I know for sure your 3 oldest, like they had grown up, in First Baptist Opelika, and you being the college pastor, and you and Cassie, I mean, y'all been doing ministry together for years, and y'all still doing ministry, but like, since 2006, like that's a long time you served at First Baptist. Like, how was that for Cassie and your children?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, it's cool how the Lord works, because the Lord had really brought us all to a place of like, hey, because we stepped away to do this ministry, but we were also stepping away from the church to be from FBCO, not from the church in general. We were stepping away from FBCO to also be a part of the start of a network of house churches around the Auburn area. And so it was a big change going from a big established church to a network of house churches. When it comes to just stepping away ministry wise, Cassie and I had been praying about this for over a year. We don't do anything like flippantly. Yes, it's obedience, but it's not, just kind of go by the seat of your pants type of thing. We have been praying about it, considering this and wrestling with this. And, we'd heard a quote from a speaker a few years before that really challenged us. And it said, what are you doing right now that forces you to have faith? And we really loved that question. What are you doing that forces you to have faith? Like, you have to trust God. Like, it's either God does it or you fall flat on your face type of trust. And we kind of looked at each other and we're like, I'm not sure. And I know there's different things. I mean, like, and Parker, as you know, like my wife and I had always wanted to live a life of faith. And so there's a lot of things that we've done that people would consider very like to have to trust the Lord for. But it's one of those things where I think that has to keep growing, right? Like, what was a big point of trust at one point might not be later. It's like walking in obedience to international adoptions. Like Parker, we've adopted twice. 2 of our 5 are adopted internationally, and that was a step of faith at that time. But now it's just like, that's just life, right? Like, I mean, they're just my boys. They're not right. Like trust the Lord to keep on walking in adoption. Like, no, it's done now. And it's beautiful. And so there's those kind of things that are like different things the Lord has called us to. There's always this push. Okay, well, what are you doing to force you to have faith? And stepping away from such a steady salary, and don't have to raise your own funds. It's all all set up for you in the system of a large established church. That's all great, and it's such a blessing. Stepping away from that to raise all your own funds and do something that nobody even fully wraps their mind around what it is, and it has to keep on asking you the same questions multiple times. Like all this kind of stuff. Yeah, it was scary, but it was that beautiful step of, this requires us to have faith, and so this is good. And when you force yourself to trust the Lord, you put yourself in a position of getting to see Him prove Himself faithful time and time and time again, and it grows your faith, and it just becomes, man, just the best thing. Like, I can just walk y'all through answered prayer after answered prayer after answered prayer, that, I probably wouldn't have had I not put myself in such a place of having to trust the Lord. So, I that's probably a weird turn to that question that you asked me, but that's what Cassie and I wanted, and we've been walking in that ever since. And I'm not saying that it's been easy, but it's been good. It's been so good. For the kids, yeah. So it was 5 years ago, or I guess almost 5 years ago now. And so my oldest was 12, about to turn 13. Very mature, like, has always been, as in a really beautiful way. Jake Parker knows this, but my daughter essentially got discipled by amazing college students and just post-college students. Kayla, Taylor loves Kayla. So many different girls that have,
I'm just kidding. I'm just playing.
But, so many different girls. So she was just so mature. And to be honest, she had kind of gotten to a point, like, she had just started in like the earliest stages of the youth ministry, and really had already become kind of disenfranchised with what you can imagine of like a large church youth ministry in a southern town. Very, I hate to say it, and this is nothing negative to First Baptist Opelika's youth ministry. This is true of a lot of the kids that come into it. A lot of like who's who at school, a lot of cliques in the youth group, not a lot of like, let's run hard after Jesus together, type of thing. And so, she being our oldest was kind of like, I'm good. Like I wasn't really dying to get this experience. And so, the thought of a different approach to living out our faith in the context of the local church, she was not only like okay with, but very maturely excited about. And so that was really good. The boys, my boys were at the time, like 9, 8, 7, and like 2. So yeah, they didn't have as much of the context of that. They did like that. There was now zero pressure to dress up in any way on a Sunday. We're pretty.
Heck yeah.
Yeah. Hey, First Baptist Opelika, they were. Steve had him. He wore a suit and tie every Sunday. Still,
Yes, he did. Yes, he did.
He brought the word every Sunday, though. That's for sure.
Yeah. Whenever I go to Auburn, shout out to Steve. It's Scoggins, right? Not Scroggins. Scoggins. I think I for the longest time I was like, I don't even know if there's an R in there or not. But Steve Scoggins, like, I went and Parker was like, dude, he's like, this guy's like your old school, like, he's just got a voice that came down from God himself. And like, I listened to him and I was like, man, this is great. Not that he himself, like, made his words more awesome, but it was just that he stood on the word and preached the gospel and did it with authority. And I was like, this is fun.
Well, what I always tell people about Steve Scoggins is that, I learned way more from him just as a man than I ever did from him teaching. So, and most people love his teaching, and of course, I mean, I don't disagree with that one bit. But he was just an amazing, and is, I mean, he's still alive. I believe either he has just recently or is about to fully retire. But just an amazing man of God, loved people so well, loved me so well. I learned so much about, loving people through him and just through his example. So that's what I always take away most from that man.
That's a great shepherd.
He's one of these guys right here. He's
that's like, right there.
Blood, and he'd peer out at you.
Yeah.
I don't know why I remember that. I sat in the balcony, like towards the back, but I could just see them eyes looking at me.
That's right. That's classic.
Was there ever a moment, I know you're talking about like how the stepping out in faith and like, asking yourself, like, is there a moment where, or is there a situation where I'm fully relying on God? Otherwise I'm going to fall flat on my face. when did that, not that it changed, I know you said it doesn't necessarily always, it's not always easy, but when did you realize, like, this is like, what's an example of God proving that faithfulness?
Oh man.
Or one of your favorite examples, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's one of your first ones or.
Yeah. This is going to be, again, here's a story that kind of shows it, both in the sense that it doesn't always come the exact way you think it will, So, our first year, we raised some support, had some funding there, raised some support, but very quickly it was like, hey, the support's not coming in like we need it to. And so it was, and within that first year, it's like, I got to figure out something else to help provide for my family. And so I started working. I became a handyman. I mean, like, I was a high end bougie handyman. I worked for interior designers, and then I got jobs with individuals and this kind of stuff. And I did, I'm hanging chandeliers and drapes, and I'm installing shiplap, and I'm doing all this kind of stuff. And I know this sounds weird, but it's like the Lord in that season, it was so cool to see. He provided, and for the first however many months, I think it was probably 7, 8 or so months, that the Lord just provided everything that we needed so that I could focus and get the ministry off the ground full time. And then it was like, hey, then that funding went away, and it was like, but here's this opportunity to work in this way. And I still remember that summer, man, that it's the way the Lord provides in cool ways. Because I've been praying multiple things. Like, we didn't have enough money to do a family vacation.
Mm-hmm.
I was needing these jobs to come in through this handyman thing, and they just kind of would keep coming in randomly. And here's what happens. This was start of the summer. I go and work on this this lake house for this interior designer, and that she had multiple things there to do. And I took 2 of my kids with me, had a couple jobs for them to do. And I was like, look, I'd already been there before. So I was like, look, y'all can sit on the porch swing and read whenever I'm doing other stuff. And because it's like an all day thing. We pull up, and my son goes, ooh, Dad, this is an awesome lake house. It wasn't that amazing. I'd been in much bigger, but it was a really nice one. He goes, do you think they'd let us stay here? I was like, great. I've worked on many lake houses. No one has ever offered for us to stay here. Right. And that very day, the owner shows up, and I didn't know he was going to show up. Kind of felt bad that my kids were there. He loved it because he was like, man, I love that you're teaching your kids how to work. And this is at a young age. This is awesome. Sure enough, before we leave, he goes, hey, you should bring your family. Y'all should come stay here one time. Like, I'm here on the weekends, but in the middle of the week, y'all should just make a vacation of it. And I thought, I kind of thought it was one of those things like, hey, we should grab coffee.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And then, and so I didn't really push, of course. And we go to leave, and he goes, oh, wait, hey, come here. Let me go show you where I keep the keys to the boat and the Sea-Doo so that y'all can use them when you come back here in a few weeks. Oh my gosh. And I was like, okay. And so I knew he meant it. And then, so sure enough, we didn't have money for a vacation that summer. Lord provided it that way. We go on that vacation. We're there that week. And it was kind of those things like, hey, I'll do a couple more jobs for you as like a thank you for letting us stay here. And we're there. And at the end of the week, it dawns on me. It's like, man, I don't have any jobs lined up after this. Where's the money going to come from? And so I just start praying, like, Lord, what are you going to do? So here I am, and he's provided this vacation opportunity for our family for free at the lake in a nice lake house. The ministry has been rolling along incredibly healthily well. I'm there at the lake house. Last day, I get 3 different calls of new jobs coming in, as well as all these different things lining up for the ministry for that week, for the next week. I mean, it's just like he just kept providing time and time again. That handyman job covered all of our expenses beyond what the ministry couldn't cover. The handyman job covered it for through COVID, all that kind of stuff for like whatever, it's like a year and a half. And then as soon as I, by faith, was like, Lord, the ministry is getting too big and too busy. I can't do both. I tried to sell it. I tried to, do it, get other people working for me. That never worked. I said, I'm just going to have to close it down and trust you. And immediately when we closed it down, the Lord started bringing in more and more support, and we've never lacked. And the ministry's never gone in the red or anything like that ever since closing that down. And so that's just, that story of that week was this kind of thing of, no, it's not always comes in this like beautiful package. It came for me with an opportunity to work hard, but it came with that opportunity that only God could provide. And then when the time came for me to let it go, he then immediately at that point said, okay, thank you for trusting me with letting this go now. And now I'm going to bring in this provision. And he's just continued to provide ever since then. And so it's just that, the Jehovah Jireh, the Lord, my provider type of thing, just in all kind of different ways, whether it's a job to do or a free vacation spot, or it's a new ministry contact or whatever it might be. It's all those ways.
That's awesome.
That's really cool.
What comes to mind is, when when he's going throughout his ministry, he talks about how he worked, and he didn't get anything from anybody because he worked for it. And that's the things that was popping in my mind is like God provided, for Paul and his ministry. And then there was a time for him to work and a time for him to go travel and share the gospel. And there's a time for him to work and it's time for all that. And he just was faithful. So that's really cool.
That's what I think. Yeah, that was a bougie tent maker.
Yeah, a bougie tent maker. That's really cool, man. And that is awesome for your kids to see that too. Like, them seeing their father, trusting the Lord, like, hey, I don't really know what's going to happen, but I know God is faithful and he's going to provide for us. And I'm not just hanging out. I'm looking for ways, to work and all that kind of stuff. So that's really cool. But, go back to kind of like the Oaks Collaborative. I know we've talked about you guys doing the incoming freshmen and transfer students. You guys also do other local ministries as well. Can you kind of explain some of those?
Yeah. So our next big thing, like I guess our two biggest ministries, one is freshman retreats. And we say, the big thing we're trying to address there is one statistic that we hate. And that's that 70% of high school seniors that are, following Christ in high school will fall away from their faith in college. That's the statistic. We want to change that statistic. One of our other big ministries is another statistic we're trying to change. And that is that some stats say 65%, some say 70% of international students will never enter the home of an American or have a meaningful relationship with an American while studying in the United States. Millions of international students study in the United States every year. And so you're talking about so many people coming in and going out, never being welcomed into our nation, into our culture. That's sad in general for Americans not being any more welcoming than that, because when we go overseas, typically we get welcomed pretty well. But it's a travesty when you have all these Christians in a place and you have the nations that are coming to our campus, and we're missing an opportunity to proclaim the gospel to them. Well, at first I'd say we're missing an opportunity to love our neighbors as ourselves, right? Like that. Let's just start there. We're just called to love our neighbors ourselves. Here's our neighbor that knows no one and is in a foreign land. All throughout the Old Testament, God called the people of Israel to care for the sojourner in their midst. And so we're called to do that because we were sojourners, and we're sojourners in this world. This world is not our home, right? And so we're called to do that, and we miss this opportunity. And of course, we're called to reach the nations with the gospel, and they're here at our doorstep, and we do nothing. And so we call them exchange retreats. It's a fun cultural exchange weekend, that we put on, and it's about getting international students there, bringing local students that are followers of Christ there. We don't have a worship service. We don't preach. We just have a fun cultural exchange. And and they create these relationships that then continue on and end up being gospel relationships, end up being studying the Bible together, talking about faith. I mean, these kind of things. We've seen a lot of fruit come out of those, and those are also spreading to other campuses. In fact, Jake, another one for your alma mater, just happened at Troy this past weekend.
That's cool.
They did a cool thing there this past weekend with about, I can't remember how many they had, about 30 different international students were there. So
yeah, Troy has Troy's very proud to call themselves, I want to say they call themselves the International University of either Alabama. I can't remember. They started coining this phrase. It's on like all the signs when you drive into Troy, but they've always had a very large international student base. That's really awesome.
Yeah. So that's been a really cool ministry. I mean, you just see it's very much so like as it should be. We should be bringing the nations together like this. And so, I mean, we have these things, and we'll have typically 15 to 20 different nations represented at it. And it's just, you just look at it and you're like, man, this is what the kingdom is. The kingdom of heaven is going to be like, right? Like we're going to be celebrating with all these different nations. And so that's our like second kind of biggest ministry. And then we have some local ministries they're really just in Auburn. One is called Vecinos. It's our Hispanic ministry. Vecinos means neighbor in Spanish. And essentially it's just that in a lot of our communities, we do a really poor job of neighboring, of being a welcoming neighbor to the Hispanic community. And so this ministry is, I really just advise them. This is student 100% college student led, empowered. It's really cool. And it was started up by one of our staff members a couple years ago, but the students are just rolling with it now. And I just coach them and advise them and come alongside them in some really cool ways. And then with that, we also have a little baseball league. We call it the Sandlot Development League. And it's very closely linked with Vecinos. It's mostly Vecinos kids, but essentially it was designed for kids that couldn't partake in city league sports, whether, for financial reasons or for, parental involvement and transportation reasons. And so we're starting back up this Sunday. Actually, we had to take a break for the winter. So starting back up this Sunday, we'll be out at MLK Park. Which is really like, it's an old park. It's it is a sandlot. I mean, it is that. It's not kept up well. And we go and pick up the kids and bring them. We have lunch and we do some baseball drills and have a little pickup game and have we call it a bucket talk, where we just sit down on the bucket, have a little devotional, talking to them about essentially like character talk, but with Christ as our example. And so we call it Sandlot Development. Sandlot because there's nothing fancy about it. It's going to be ragtag. We know that. Development because it's about spiritual development, physical development, social development, moral development, and then league because we've done things. We've given them jerseys and hats because we want it to have this element of organization to it, so something they can be proud of, because they don't get to partake in the league sports. So something they can wear the jersey to school, they can wear the hat, and be like, yeah, this is my team. So that's been a fun thing that we've been doing since 2020.
That's so awesome, man. What's funny is my oldest son, Beckham, started T-ball this year, and I'm actually coaching him with one of my he's doing good. he's having a blast. He's having so much fun. But one of the things that I've noticed is that there are, obviously there's a lot of money in Fairhope, a ton of money. But there are not very many kids that don't have money and playing in the rec ball league. And I noticed that this year, and I was like, what are we doing? Like it costs like $90 to play in the league. Then the rec league doesn't provide helmets, bats, gloves, nothing. Like when we used to play, like Jake's dad was actually our rec department director. So he got this whole thing where we never had to buy a helmet. Like you didn't have to worry about a bat. You just showed up. It's probably over like $250 just to play 5-year-old T-ball. And I think that's kind of absurd from the get-go, but we can afford it But then like there's a lot of kids that can't afford it, or doesn't have a parent to come pick them up. And so like I've actually told Kayla this is a need in Fairhope too, because not every kid can play this. They can't afford $250.
And that realization that you've had is exactly how Sandlot started. I was just looking around my boys, baseball league and going, man, this is not representative of the demographics of our city. And
it's all white. To be honest, it's all white people.
And just like you, I mean, I grew up in a much smaller town than Troy, and everybody played everything, and I mean, the stuff was provided, but it's just like everybody played everything because there was virtually no cost to it. And everything was a lot closer. It was a small town, so it was a little bit different there, but man, it provides opportunities. I mean, I'm not one of these people that I think sports is everything, but man, I do think sports is an amazing tool. It could be used for amazing purposes. And I believe, Parker, I watched that when I watched Riley talk about just the godly man he saw in you, and it made, I knew that, but it's really cool to hear, to hear somebody come through your school saying that. But I love what a brother of mine said. This guy, I asked him, how does he approach sports, with his kids and everything like that. And this guy actually played pro baseball for a while. He had a long career, pitcher, and it's Scott Sullivan. Parker, I think you might know. He pitched for the Reds for a while. And he's a member at FBCO. He's a famous sidearm pitcher. Really, really great guy too. Just loves the Lord. And I asked him, how he handles that with his kids, and he had this amazing wisdom that he gave me. He says, Trace, we use the rhetoric that sports builds character. And he says, that's not true, because if that were true, then our professional athletes would be our most upstanding people in society, right? Sports inherently built character. He goes, but sports don't build character. Men with character build character into athletes as they invest in them. And that's what we've got to make sure that we're doing with sports, is using sports as a tool to build the character into our kids, and not just our own kids, and make sure. And if you're letting somebody else coach your kid and on through high school, make sure that their character is growing, in the direction you want it to grow in. Right. And so that's what's needed for so many of these kids that don't have this opportunity in sports. And sadly, we've just let, I think the sports system run away with everything and kind of get hijacked.
Yeah. I have backtracking a smidge about the international ministry.
Yeah.
Random question. How many of them, because I know from going to Troy, like a lot of the Chinese and Asian students, they come over and they don't speak a lick of English. Do you have any people who are translators, or is that even a thought when you're going through this of like, hey, how is our communication gonna transpire? And then second question is there any follow-up after that, because it's cool to say like, hey, we hung out with some international students this week, man. Is there a calling after, like, hey, stay in touch with them, develop a real relationship with them, not just like a fleeting moment, so to speak?
Yeah. So I'll speak to both those things. Yeah, that might have been more the case, back in your day, Jake, but now all international students now are required to pass a basic English competency. And so they're all internationals that come are decently conversational in English. Okay. Now, some you have to have a little bit more patience with and a little more,
sure.
But yeah, for the most part, they're decently conversational. Some are incredible, but most are decently conversational. And then, as far as the follow-up, that's both with our freshman retreats and with our international retreats. I'm not an events guy. Like, I'm not a, one and done event guy. I think they're good, but I don't think they're really worth all the money that's put towards them if nothing is really focused on with what happens afterwards. And so both for our freshman retreats and for our international retreats, we spend more time with our people that we're training for them, counselors for the freshman retreats, and then we call them hosts for the international retreats. You're helping us host this, and so we spend more time on follow up. What is follow up supposed to look like? So for the freshman retreats, this isn't like a high school D now. You're not just coming to like lead this group for the weekend and then be done with them. You're signing up for their entire freshman year. You're signing up to try and get lunch with them during the week, maybe even disciple them, make sure they have a ride to church. You're signing up to follow up with them like that. For the international students, it's the same thing. We tell the hosts, if you're just coming to try and hit some international students hard with the gospel pitch, and then if they don't respond, you take off, then don't come, because we don't even want you doing that. I would prefer
Stephen Pearl thing. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I had to.
You had to throw Stephen in there somewhere.
I had to. Well, we all know. Come on.
Hey, we're 51 minutes in. If he's still listening, good for him.
But yeah, so we say, look, we want you getting to know them. In fact, it's okay if you don't share the gospel at all this weekend. That's actually even good, because it'd be better for you to go grab lunch with them next week or the next, or keep on going. And the gospel comes once they've learned to trust you, and then they know they can trust what you're saying to them. And so that's essential. And then, yes, we follow up with our hosts to see, how are you doing on follow up? Who are you meeting up with? Because some it's one-on-one, and some it's these group of 3, American students with this group of 5 Indian students that are all getting together once a week to cook dinner and hang out and do something, cool. go play pickleball together. And so there's all kind of those cool things that are happening, but that's where the magic happens, and those relationships and the salvation stories that we have came not because one person shared the gospel with that one international student, but I can tell you this one guy named Luis, and one of our people tracked down, I think he came up with 17 different purposeful relationships that Luis had with believers that kind of came out of our retreat and then connected through different churches and different ministries and we're spending time with him, and over time sharing the gospel with him until he believed and repented and was baptized. And so there's awesome things like that kind of follow up.
That's cool.
It's really cool.
It's I heard somebody say one time, I don't know who said this, but America, sometimes we can just stay over in America and just stay in our little bubble and not worry about the nations, which is obviously unbiblical. So I heard somebody say one time, it's like God saying, okay, since you won't go to the nations, I'm going to bring the nations to you. And it's right here. All you got to do is just be faithful and just say something, do something. So that's really cool.
Yeah.
Are you, so I guess I know when we were at First Baptist and you were the college minister, we did missional communities, which I thought was really cool. Instead of doing small groups, you called them missional communities, which the whole point of that was, yes, we are to meet together, but our whole goal is to go out and be missional where we are. Do you still kind of carry that idea where you are? It kind of sounds like that, but do you guys kind of carry that idea in the Oaks Collaborative?
Yeah, man, that's something, I think, I don't even know when I developed this conviction, but the conviction that for most Christians in America, our knowledge far outweighs our obedience. Everybody wants to talk about wanting to know the word better, but for most of it, we know enough. We need to start doing the things that we do know. And so, yeah, that's been just a general conviction of mine as a follower of Christ first, and then of course as a minister and leader, as to try and lead others to that point. And so, yes, missional communities. Yeah, Kayla helped us, get that off the ground. When she came on and worked with me, I was like, all right, this is what we're moving towards. Help me figure this out, and so we started working on that together. And And so, yeah, I'd say that all of this, like I was saying with our freshman retreats, by the end of the weekend, we at all of our retreats across all of our different schools around the Southeast, we're all doing the same thing, which is, okay, well, you've heard that Christ is worth living for in college. You've heard that you need to, you should live for him in college, and you should do that in the context of a local church. Now let's talk about how you're to live missionally for him, like how you live missionally on campus, because it's been a long time since I've read this book, so I'm not endorsing it or bashing it, but there's this book that was written a long time ago called How to Stay Christian in College. And like I said, I don't remember too much about it, but I know that I don't really love that title because it sounds so weak, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Stay Christian in college? I don't want people just to stay Christian. I want them to live vibrantly into all that God has called them to. And that is a missional lifestyle. Like, I don't want people just to focus on not falling into deep sin and not getting stuck in the party scene. There's that wouldn't even be a worry if you're so focused on living on mission with, notice I said with God in college. It's not like I have to do all this stuff for God. I get to do this with him. It's a joy. It's not even a responsibility. It's a privilege, right? Like, that's what I want people to get. And that's, I would say that's been at the kind of the heart of my ministry towards college students, whether that was in the context of a, local church college ministry, or that's through, leading these retreats. It's all about that. Let's live missionally, in every way.
That's great. I think that's a great place to leave off too. I mean,
yeah.
We're super encouraged by everything you're doing. I didn't even realize until like we started looking at I started doing a little bit of research that you had expanded past Auburn. I was like, I just thought this was still an Auburn thing, but that's really cool to hear that it's been at a lot of other schools. So can you just tell people real quick how they can find out about the Oaks Collaborative, and if there's anyone because I know my high school, some of my wife and I help out with our high school ministry at our church. I know some of these guys listen to this podcast, and so a lot of them want to go to Auburn. So how can they find out more about the Oaks Collaborative?
Yeah. So our website is our, kind of one-stop shop for everything. It's just called theoakscollaborative.com. And on that, it'll list out all the different schools that we're at, but real quick, I would just run through those. So if you know somebody, all of our different schools have retreats at different names, so you can see those on there. So you just scroll down that home page, you're going to see a map of the lower 48 states, and you'll be able to click and see all the different schools. But if you know somebody going to Auburn, Troy, Bama, Ole Miss, UGA, Mississippi State, Birmingham area schools. We've got one that's kind of for Samford, UAB, all that. University of North Alabama, Florida State, LSU, University of Tennessee at Knoxville, University of Kentucky, JSU. We're starting one at JSU this year. Freshmen going to any of those schools, connect them to those retreats that we have there, because that'd be an amazing way for them to start off their college experience at those schools.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Well, thanks for joining us, Trace. I will say, for those that are listeners that are going into college, like, that was the time that I feel like I grew the most in my faith. And it was because I was so focused on school, but Trace, you challenged me to focus on my relationship with the Lord more, and to not be about me and what I'm majoring in and all that kind of stuff, and just focus on being missional and where I am. So thank you for all that you did for me and for all our students and for my wife. Like, I truly, Jake would agree with this. Like, I would not be where I am today as a follower of Christ without those years I was at Auburn and involved in your ministry and at First Baptist. And I know you would say praise the Lord for that, but thank you for your faithfulness. Thank you for just pouring in and just being faithful to what God's calling you. Because just like Jake said, I'm encouraged. Always encouraged by you, but and your family. But I'm encouraged because, I will also say, Trace might not say it, but I'll say it. Support them, give them some support, because what God is doing through their ministry is just so needed. It's so needed. So you can go on their website. We'll put it on the description box, and you can go to the donate tab, and anything will help because you're doing God's work. So thank you, Trace, for joining us. We appreciate it.
I appreciate those kind words and appreciate getting to be here, man. I felt honored, and this was fun. Thank you, guys.
Yep. We'll see you next time.